Alright, so this is my Death Tallica Darkness Dragon World deck. So this is Death Ruler Burial. He has Shadow Dive. This card can attack your opponent even if there is a monster in your opponent's center. So it's essentially a direct attacker with 2 crits. So that's awesome. And he is a deep card, so this will be useful for when you obviously summon your Black Dragon of Demise, Death Tallica. We have another deep card, and this is Death Ruler Gallows. Call cost of 1 gauge. He has Shadow Dive as well, and he also has Soul Absorption Chain. When this card deals damage to your opponent, you gain 1 life, which is awesome. You can keep attacking your opponent for 2 damage, and you can gain life in the process. So I definitely love that. You know, my opponent's life points going down to 0 while mine keep going up, so it makes it way harder for him to defeat me. Then we have Death Ruler Blix. Call cost of 2 gauge. He also has Shadow Dive, and he has double attack once per turn, and this card can stand after it attacks. So you can essentially deal 4 damage in a single turn, and he's a size 2 monster. We have another size 2 monster, Death Ruler Vericolacus. Call cost of 1 gauge, and you put the top card of your deck into his soul. And he has Shadow Dive, and then he has also Soul Guard because of that card you put into his soul. This card will leave the field. You may discard 1 soul to prevent it. So that's awesome. So he'll be on the field a little bit longer than most of the other ones because of his Soul Guard ability, and he deals 2 damage. That's awesome. Your opponent has 10 life, so you're trying to reduce it down to 0 as soon as possible. Then we have our Mighty Boss Monster grade, our size 3. Call cost of 4 gauge. Then put all deep cards from your drop zone into this card's soul. When this card is attacked, or when this card would leave the field, as in it would leave the field by a card effect, you may put 3 cards from this card's soul to the bottom of your deck to nullify that attack or to prevent this card from leaving the field. This card cannot gain Soul Guard, and he's a double attacker. So he's a 10,000 2 crit with 3,000 defense, double attacker, so you could essentially wipe out 2 monsters with this. So it definitely would be easy to clear the center by attacking to clear the center and then attack directly to deal 2 damage to your opponent, which is awesome. And then of course you know, it'd be hard to get this bad boy off the field because of his ability to nullify attacks and destruction. So one thing I wish that this deck had was the ability to shuffle the deck. Hopefully maybe someday they'll create that ability, and that'd be nice, because it definitely will make the deck run better. Because I don't want to, because the whole putting the 3 cards from his soul to the bottom of the deck as opposed to shuffling it back into the deck makes it less likely you're going to be able to reuse those cards that you already used to summon him in the first place. I want to be able to reuse them. I want to have essentially like an infinite loop where I can constantly bring out Death Tallica over and over again, and not just use him over and over again, but also be able to use other size 3 boss monster, Death Ruler 13. He has a call cost of 2 gauge. When this card enters the field, deal 1 damage to your opponent, which is great, just being able to deal damage without even attacking. If there are exactly 13 cards in your opponent's drop zone, deal 5 damage to your opponent instead. Now remember, your opponent plays with 10 life, so if you manage to get summon this monster twice in a single duel, you win, you know what I mean? So that alone is a win condition if your opponent has exactly 13 cards in their drop zone. But the ability to deal 1 damage already is enough. So think about it, you summon him 10 times, that's victory right there. Now you also have to take into account that he's a double attacker and he has 2 crits. So you summon him, deal 1 damage, then you can essentially if your opponent's center is open, you can deal 4 damage by battle, and that right there is 5 damage in a single turn, because he's a double attacker. He's also a deep card, so obviously he can go into your Tallica's soul as a material. He's 13,000 double attacker, so he can clear the field relatively easy. And then you can do stuff like link attack to take down even more powerful monsters. So definitely great cards to play with. I have Battlefield military ban, but if they ever create a set spell that has a shuffling ability for this, archetype, this world, I would replace this with that, because the ability to shuffle my deck would be very useful after I use Tallica's abilities to put cards back into the deck. Then of course a very, very crucial card in getting enough cards in the drop zone to keep the Tallica on the field longer, as well as it will help you summon him. It's XLN, because XLN will send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So that right there is filling up your grave with depth cards for your Tallica, and then you get to put the top card of your deck into your gauge. So right there, off of 1 XLN, you just took 6 cards out your deck. So you're thinning out your deck, and of course this card doesn't state that you can only play 1 per turn. So if you have more than 1 copy, you can play more than 1 copy. For example, if you have 2 copies and you play both copies, you're going to end up with 12 cards in the drop zone with 3 gauge if you soul and charge that turn, and you have an extra card in your hand because you soul charged. You charged and draw. So you drew a card, you charged, then you played a card. So right there, you would have taken 16 cards out your deck from a 50 card deck. So yeah, that's almost 50% of your deck. That's about what, say 20%, something like that. Nah, more than that, roughly 40% maybe of your deck already out. So you'll be left with roughly less than 40 cards left in your deck, like around 30 something, 20 something. You get the idea. Alright, but instead, for now, we have Battlefield military ban. That's just to give you more power. It's a set spell, so stay on the field, pay 1 gauge, and all your monsters gain 1,000 extra power in case you need it to run over certain monsters, as well as this card affects stacks. So the more copies you have, the more power you have. I already mentioned Excel. Then we got Black Dragon Shield. In case your center managed to be open, which shouldn't be, you should make sure you have a monster in your center. Specifically, Tallica will typically be in your center, of course, and he'll be able to defend you. Or if somehow your opponent manages to beat him or any of your other monsters you have in your center, you'll need some type of defense. And the ability, and this is the deep card. No, this is not a deep card. One of the issues I have with it, obviously, is that it's not a deep card. I keep forgetting it's not a deep card, but it's a very good card nonetheless. So it's useful to use. But I wish it was a deep card, because man, that'd be crazy. Because then I could reuse it over and over again using Tallica's soul ability. Right? You may only cast this card if you would take damage, and if you have no monster in your center. Right? And then the damage is reduced to 0 and you gain a life. So gaining life is awesome, because it makes it hard for your opponent to beat you, especially against impact cards. You can prevent your opponent from meeting the requirements to use their impact card to beat you by you having more life than they can take out in 1 shot. This is a deep card. It's a counter. The next time you would be dealt damage this turn, it is reduced by 2 damage. For example, if you use this counter before you take damage, you will be able to reduce that damage. So that's the effect. So you can play this during your opponent's turn, of course, as well as Black Dragon Shield. That's what counters are. You can play them from your hand. Your opponent's turn, you don't have to pay no gauge. So that's awesome. So you save up your gauges for the summoning of Tallica. Then we got Devil Stigma, another good defensive card, because you can gain a life and you can charge your gauge, so that way you'll be able to summon your Death Tallica and some of your other monsters that require gauges. You cannot cast this card during the final phase, so you can't use this as a response to an impact card to prevent the impact card from taking you out. But you can play this before your opponent gets to their final phase, so that we can gain a life. So that way you're not in the zone to be impact. You know what I mean? You're not in the danger zone to get impact. And it's a counter, so you can play the opponent's turn, of course. Destroy a monster on your field. If you do, put 2 cards from the top of your deck into your gauge and gain a life. So life gain is important, because that will prevent you from, like I said, losing from an impact card, and being able to charge your gauge is good, because it'll help you summon your Death Tallica or any of your other important cards. We got Burning Bow. Equip cost is 2 gauge. You can attack with this card even if you have a monster in your center, so that's very useful for when you have Death Tallica in your center. You play this, and you have a nice little 1 crit 2000. It might not seem like a lot, but the fact that you have Death Tallica, and Death Tallica can pretty much clear the center zone of your opponent's field for being able to do direct attacks to your opponent. This 2001 crit is more than enough to deal some damage, weaken your opponent. If your opponent's center is already open, the attacker will deal 4 damage. Burning Bolt would deal 1, so that's 5 damage already. That's already half your opponent's life points, so you get closer to defeating him, which is what you want to do. Then we have, for the buddy, we have 2 copies in the main deck of Purgatory Knight's Malice Force Dragon. He just has a really good effect. He's 3 crits, 8,000 power, 5,000 defense, which is pretty decent stats. But the main usefulness of him, besides the fact he's cool looking, is when this card enters the field, destroy a monster on your opponent's field. So that's a very useful effect. So to just have it there generically is very useful. And then as the buddy, you have a 3rd copy, so that way he could be your buddy, so you can do the little buddy gift scenario, because gaining life is very useful. And then of course you need your Darkness Dragon World flag, so that way you can play and represent Darkness Dragon World. And that's the end of the deck profile.